It's probably one of the most isolated places I've ever been. Ben Fogle But it was among the tents of Everest Base Camp that TV adventurer Ben Fogle met Special Forces hardman Ant Middleton, star of Channel 4's SAS, Who Dares Wins. Over the next 6 weeks the two men enjoyed an unlikely bromance as they participated in the same acclimation treks and climbs in preparation for their separate assaults on the world's highest peak. It's bizarre that I spent a great deal of time with Ant, who has become a friend now, says Fogle in an exclusive interview with the Daily Express, and we both had unique experiences. Like Fogle, the former sniper with the Special Boat Service, the Royal Navy's sister service to the SAS- was making a TV documentary about his ascent. It was Middleton who set off first for the summit. But with his oxygen running low he became separated from the rest of his team and they soon began to assume the worst. When word of Middleton's plight reached Fogle, huddling in a tent at Camp 4 at the foot of the so-called death zone at 8,000 meters, he was devastated. To see the tears on his team's faces was enough to bring me to tears, he says. He had been missing since the morning. Rumors were circulating that a Sherpa had been blown off the summit and things were looking bleak. Obviously his experience was pretty terrifying, certainly for those who thought he was dead for many hours. This only happened in films. Now here we were stormbound in the death zone with the prospect of a full-scale search. Fortunately Middleton and his Sherpas were later located battered and bruised but alive after having successfully reached the summit. The episode did nothing for Fogle's morale, however. It knocked my confidence as our tent was hammered by hurricane-force winds, he admits. My sleeping bag froze but we weathered out the storm until the next day when we finally made our summit bid. From there we began the even steeper ascent up towards the south summit. Late at night we trekked up the 60-degree incline towards the famous balcony, as the Daily Express reported earlier this month. And this is when things went from bad to worse. The second tank went shortly after he had reached the top of Hillary's Step, the sheer rock face that forms the final and most intimidating barrier to climbers heading for the top. While climbers can survive without supplementary oxygen if they are resting in the death zone, it is difficult to make progress at altitude without it. And the final straight to the north summit was a dangerous clamber along a razor ridge of ice and snow. It's probably one of the most isolated places I've ever been, says Fogle. No helicopters can reach you, which is why when the second bottle went there was an extreme nervousness because I certainly couldn't see how I was going to get out of that situation. It was his team leader, the renowned British mountaineer Kenton Cool, a veteran of no fewer than 12 summits, who came to his rescue. With extraordinary selflessness he took off his own tank and mask and handed it to Fogle. The two men then made their way to the summit, Fogle with oxygen, Cool without. At the summit we were lucky enough to meet groups who'd been climbing from the north side, the Chinese side, and from our side, says Fogle. As Kenton had been up many times he knows pretty much everyone and there was a Sherpa there with a spare bottle, mask and regulator, which was an amazing stroke of luck because it's not usual for people to have spares. His euphoria at reaching the summit was tempered by the knowledge that he had yet to embark on the most difficult part of the climb, the descent. Obviously it's all very well getting to the summit but then you have to get down again, he explains. And going down Everest is when a lot of accidents happen. It's when people who are fatigued find that they haven't left sufficient energy for a descent. In this context he was unsure whether to call his wife Marina. I felt it might be slightly bad karma to call her given that I still had to get all the way down but I'm glad I did because I wanted to share that moment with her. That moment of standing on the roof of the world. It was very emotional and I was very teary. It's just such an extraordinary sight. You'll never see anything like it. To see mountains that you know are 7,000 meters high ranged below you like a miniature world is amazing. Fogle's feat is all the more remarkable for having been achieved on a tea of a handful of jelly babies. Your appetite changes at altitude, he reveals. I had other things with me, including some chocolate but actually all I wanted was jelly babies. He hardly drank anything either. I had water with me but I didn't have an insulated bottle so my water froze as soon as we left Camp 4. I did eat some snow but I'm a bit of a camel. It's one of my expedition things. When I go running, I kind of naively thought it would be the same for that final ascent. When I do anything, I don't actually need water along the way. 30 p.m. and arrived at Camp 2, having summited at 8 p.m. the next day. In the event, the record of his climb will show that he departed Camp 4 at 8. His family decided that the conqueror of Everest deserved a reception committee on his return. From there he made his way back to Kathmandu and caught a flight to the UK. And so Fogle found himself greeted by not only Marina and children Ludo and Fiona but his parents, his sister and his father-in-law. It was amazing to see them. The children were so excited, he says. That first hug with them kind of made it all worthwhile. Fogle, who wrote an Everest diary exclusively for the Daily Express, adds, "I really felt a wave of goodwill and I'd like to thank the Daily Express and all your readers for getting behind the expedition and really supporting it." Once he was settled back in, there was one more thing to be done. The whole Everest experience really did affect me profoundly and it will always be in my head more than any of the other things that I've done. And so he went down to a tattooist on Portobello Road near his home in West London and had the number 8848 inked on his left wrist along with a pair of crossed ice picks. I felt I wanted to have a lasting memory of it. Mount Everest, of course, is 8,848 meters tall. Fogle's Everest climb was backed by the Anything is Possible global initiative and is in support of the British Red Cross. He is a UN Environment Patron of the Wilderness and Mountain Hero.